Hi, welcome to Digging for Truth, presented by Associates for Biblical Research. I'm your host, Henry Smith. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all document an exorcism by Jesus where demons enter a herd of pigs who then drown in the sea. Where did this event take place? And is there any historical, archaeological kind of evidence connected to it? Well, ABR archaeologist Dr. Scott Stripling is here today to answer those questions and more and tell us all about it. Scott, great to have you back on Digging for Truth. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks, my friend. This is going to be a fun episode.
All right. So normally we would read an episode like this in the Gospels, and we would think theologically, typically, and of course that's what we should do. We should reflect theologically on it. And but there's more that can be done here with this, and you and a friend of ours, Dr. Craig Evans, and others have certainly done more with it. Let's talk about it. Let's start with the account itself and why it may be controversial.
Okay, so it's controversial because Matthew, Mark, and Luke are using different names, and different manuscripts from those different gospels are also using different names. So did the exorcism occur in the land of the Gerasenes, the Gergesenes, or the Gadarenes? Because we have different manuscripts saying different things.
Yes.
And when you dig in a little bit deeper, you can see sort of the issue is you're writing about a region. And so Gadara is 20 miles away from the Sea of Galilee, but it's within that region. The ancient name is the Girgashites were there, and so the Gergesenes, and then the Gerasenes mentioned in one of the accounts, that's modern Jerash. And so that's pretty far away as well. And so Jerash and Gadara are not on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And you could argue that, well, maybe they controlled that land, some portion of it. So that's where it's been perplexing. Is it a real account, or was it an interpolation, something that happened later? And there's a number of reasons why I don't think it happened later. For example, you have several words used that are not used anywhere else in the New Testament. They're one-time appearances of words. And normally when you get something that's an interpolation, they're going to stay very much on the beaten path of the language.
Yeah, and the issue of geographical places sometimes in the text, in the manuscripts, sometimes vary, and the way that people named regions vary. So there's some work that needs to be done with that. Tell us a little bit about, you intersected with Dr. Craig Evans on this issue because he's an expert on that kind of thing, and you're an expert on the archaeology. So how'd you get obsessed with that? That's in a positive way.
Well, we were sitting over huevos rancheros one morning on a Saturday morning talking about what new writing projects we were doing. And so he's, of course, rewriting Mark's commentary for the Word Biblical Commentary series. And he's at the section there in Mark where he's dealing with this exorcism. And so he began to explain to me that the issue that he was struggling with was exactly where did this take place? And so I began to throw out some ideas like, okay, let's look at see if we can build a criterial screen from the text itself. Like, what do we know? All three gospels say there was a cliff nearby. All three say there were tombs nearby. And they tell us that Jesus was coming in on a boat from the west side to the east side. So that's what we know. And then archaeologically, can we confirm any of that?
So you move from the known to the unknown, right, Scott? So instead of jumping to the conclusion right away that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are confused, or they got it mixed up, or they don't cohere, you kind of start with this kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about something like cliffs or tombs. I mean, I guess a cliff would be pretty easy to recognize. Share your thoughts about that.
Yeah, right. I mean, do you have a steep place where 2,000 pigs would have run down into the Sea of Galilee nearby? And so if you take that eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the implications are that it's on the northeastern shore, how many places have cliffs? And so that narrows it down somewhat. And then how many places with those cliffs have nearby tombs? Now, it's also a problem in that in modernity, we have destroyed, because if you'll remember, Syria controlled the area on the northeast side, except for the immediate area by the water. So it was 10 or 20 meters or something like that. That was Israel's right around the lake, and then Syria was right there. And so, of course, this created enormous tension. So when Israel retook this land after the war, they bulldozed, if you will, some area there to get modern roads through. And in the process, we know it's documented from publications that there were tombs that were bulldozed away at that time. But at least they were documented, and we know that they were there.
Oh, so we have a case of just generally modern construction destroying them, but no excavations done of these tombs. Am I understanding that right?
Right. Now, there are still some tombs in that area, but the dominant ones that would have been there in 1973 and following were destroyed. So, do we have cliffs? Do we have tombs? And then the third, and I think the biggest issue to me was if they were coming across on a boat from Capernaum to the east side, as the text says, where would they have landed? And then I remembered that Mendel Noon, who I met when he was like 89 years old, was sort of the world's leading expert on the Sea of Galilee and spent his life walking the shores of the Sea of Galilee from Kibbutz Engev, which is right next to Kursi, where we end up in our expedition. And I remembered that he had identified a number of ancient harbors back in the mid 80s when the water levels were very low on the Sea of Galilee. And so I went back and did my research, and guess what? I dug into ABR's website, and we had some old articles. Gordon Franz had written a good article on this. And again, that led me back to the original dig report from Tesafadius. And lo and behold, of course, they're citing Mendel Noon's research. Lo and behold, we had a harbor at ancient Kursi, which had appeared in 1985 and showed us, and I thought logically, if I were in a boat coming across the Sea of Galilee and I'm going to land on the east side, if there's a harbor, then that's the logical place to land. Well, it just so happens that that is right at ancient Kursi, which is the epicenter of the kingdom of the Girgashites, perhaps explaining why that term is used then in the Gospels. So I thought, if we can go back and relocate this ancient harbor, which is now, of course, underwater, and nobody seemed to even know about it. I didn't know anyone who knew anything about this. Even the locals, nobody seemed to know anything about it. So I talked to our friend Jim Scudder, who was asking me about what would be some great themes for upcoming episodes for his program in Grace on TBN. And so I explained this process to him. And so, of course, Jim got very into the idea. And while I was there this summer, we rented a boat. And well, Jim rented a boat, and then I went along with him with the film crew. And following the clues of where the Wadi Samak comes into the water, and going from the original dig reports, I knew that there was a huge fish tank on the shore that connected into the harbor. And so as we came in from the water to the shore, the closer we got, I thought I recognized the fish tank. And we were just elated because as we got to the shore, indeed it was the super large fish tank. Because when they caught fish, they wanted to keep them alive as long as they could.
Sure.
They get them out of the water into these tanks until they're ready to kill them and eat them. Just a couple of meters from the fish tank is where the harbor begins. And so that was our clue. Again, we could go from the known to the unknown. And so that's what led us out into the water, where we put on our scuba gear and our snorkeling gear and went down to see what we could find.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to talk more about this adventure on the ground, on the sea, and in the library, as it were, after this break.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website, lighthousetv.org, for more information. Lighthouse TV, positively different.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. We know from 3 Gospels that Jesus performed an exorcism which resulted in demons going into a herd of pigs. Where did this take place? Can we find evidence for it? Well, Dr. Scott Stripling's here to tell us all about it. Okay, Scott, you gave us a tour de force of a quite an adventure. Boy, we say that archaeology is not like Indiana Jones, but sometimes it gets a little closer to Indiana Jones. So let's talk about your time with Jim on the Sea of Galilee, looking for this place. Give us some more details about that.
Well, I had oriented Jim and his team on what to expect, and I'd done a little recon. I had the maps, and I did finally find one person who had worked on the excavation and got sort of a landmark from him. And we knew the only way we would get to it, because there's a very thick bamboo forest on the northeastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and you can't even get through it to get down to the shore. So we were going to have to come in from the water. And so we had an experienced captain who'd spent his whole life, but he knew nothing about these ancient harbors either. So I'm going from the research from the mid 80s, and from the few people that I've talked with, we've got our scuba gear ready. And so in case we think it's a promising location, we can get in the water with our cameras, go underwater, and see what we can find if the water's clear. And that's something, of course, we can't control, because many days the water's murky. It's all stirred up. But if we have clear water and we find the right spot, would we be able to find the ancient harbor? As I mentioned, we found the fish tank, and that was our big clue.
All right, so once in a while, we hear about underwater archaeology. Now, you didn't dig per se, but you put on scuba gear and got in the water? Is that what happened here?
Well, that's right. So we got into the water, and Jim and I, and of course the camera crews there with us. And so I could feel from the maps, I knew what to expect from where the fish tank was to where the piers of the harbor began. And I could see pictures of it from 1985, what it looked like. And so clearly we were on top of these massive stones, like a jetties, if you will, forming a typical harbor. And as we went underwater, we were blessed that it was a clear day, and we could see that it was clearly constructed and it was forming an ancient harbor. And so we were able to document from one end of it to the other, because we had the dimensions from the dig report, and to get the footage of it. And I just, there was such an elation that we had there, because here we had the biblical text, and we started out with this problem, if you will. Where did the miracle occur? Is it in a real historical setting? And the logic was pretty strong that if Jesus left the harbor at Capernaum, and there was a harbor on the east side, he would have gone there. And that happens to be Kursi, which is where the tradition that this miracle took place. It has tombs, it has a steep cliff. And so right there on the shore, Henry, standing on the spot, because the text is very clear that as soon as Jesus came ashore, the demoniac met him there. And so there we were at the spot, and with this realization that, wow, we're standing in a place where this event, this miracle literally took place.
Fantastic. So give us an approximation. So Kursi is the town, and we've got the harbor. What is the approximate distance do we see from the tombs that you were able to look at, or from even though the Syrian construction destroyed it, you have a general idea? How far are those two from one another?
Maybe 200 meters, something like that. So it's not far. And the text says that the pigs were grazing on a nearby hillside, and then that's where the tombs are, in that area. And to orient you a little bit further, ancient Hippos, one of the 10 Decapolis cities, is just a mile or so from here also. So at the end of the story, when it says he went back to his hometown and began to tell them, this is either Gadara, or even closer would be ancient Hippos. And he's a very successful evangelist, by the way, because when Jesus returns the following year, there's a multitude who believe.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Okay, so the cliff, proximity of the cliff as well.
Let's say that is 50 meters or less from the water. So you're coming from a height. If these pigs are running downhill and then they fall off, then you can see just exactly where they would then end up in the sea.
So back to the biblical text for a moment. Well, you've alluded to the biblical text in many places. Even the detail of the man going back to his hometown, the man who's healed and basically telling people what Jesus had done for him, that's an important consideration, right? Geographically. Yeah. So go back though to these variations of the name, the Gadarenes, the Gersha. Tell us which one that's pointing to then.
Yeah, so it can be a little bit confusing. So you have the Gadarene, so he's sometimes called the Gadarene demoniac, but Gadara is a long distance away from modern Umkais or Gadara today. You can see down on the Sea of Galilee, but it's hard to picture how pigs from up there, I don't think they would have been good enough shape to run that far, even if they were filled with demons. And then you have the land of the Gerasenes,
Yes.
which is Jerash, modern Jerash. That's 20 miles or more to the south. And so again, it's hard to, it may be the region of the Gerasenes, but it's not the site. And then we have the other variant, which is the Gergesenes, which Origen struggles with this whole thing. Origen was a tremendous textual scholar, and he personally went to the site, and he struggled with all these names and talked through the possibilities and the manuscripts. And guess what? Origen arrived at the same conclusion that we did. He said Kursi must be the seat of the ancient Gergesenes nearby Engev, and that's likely where it took place. Our evidence suggests the very same thing. Now, Origen probably didn't know anything about the harbor. I assume it was underwater at that point. But our research confirms the research that Origen did in this early 3rd century.
Excellent. All right, we're going to take a break, Scott. We'll be right back after this message.
In a culture of intense Bible-denying skepticism, Associates for Biblical Research exists to strengthen followers of Jesus by affirming the authority of the Bible. Our archaeological fieldwork and original research form a strong foundation in upholding the reliability of the Scriptures. For students or anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible, please visit our website and partner with us by joining our prayer team or financially supporting this ministry. And thank you for standing with us.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. We're exploring the text of Mark 5 and also Matthew and Luke's account of the exorcism of demons who then went into the pigs and into the Sea of Galilee. It's been a fascinating ride here we've taken with Dr. Stripling. Boy, I'll tell you, I bet you a lot of people are watching that are jealous. I know I am. I got to repent, brother. What a great story. But this is sometimes where the world of research and archaeology takes us, doesn't it? And what a blessing that is. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the mention of legion. You want to talk a little bit about that. Tell us what the text says. Tell us what some connections might be there historically.
Jesus said, "What is your name?" And the demons answered, "Legion, for we are many." That name Legion is not a coincidence. And of course, we all know that a Roman legion had 6,000 men within it. The 10th Roman legion was stationed in Damascus, but there were cohorts from the 10th legion that were stationed down in the Galilee. And so people interacted with these all the time. And these Roman centurions at Capernaum, for example, and other places, they're part of these larger legions. So the common person in that area certainly knew what a legion was. And I would suggest that the pigs are for the legion, because the symbol of the 10th Roman legion is, guess what? It's a pig. On the banner of the 10th legion is a pig. And that's their symbol. And so here we have 2,000 pigs at a cost of today $250 per pig. That's $500,000 in inventory. These people were in big trouble. No wonder they wanted Jesus to leave. I mean, they're out of business. And the Romans are not going to be happy because they probably have a military contract that they're supplying meat to them, their preferred meat. So when this guy says our name is Legion, somehow he is, and he's probably a Gentile. He's from one of these Decapolis cities. Somehow he's gotten filled with some nasty Roman legion demons. And these demons, of course, they really don't want to go into the abyss. They bring that up. Don't send us into the abyss.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Boy, you could do a lot with that theologically. What's happening? How spiritual forces influence forces in the world. Institutions, governments, those kind of things. Like boy, there's got to be some kind of connection. It's not just the generic use of the term. That's
Mm.
so tempting to go into. I mean, that might preach pretty well too,
Yeah,
Scott.
I know.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so now there's some archaeological evidence also here beyond the harbor itself. A chapel. Tell us about that and anything associated with it.
There is a chapel from the Byzantine period on the top of the hill that overlooks Kursi, which you can see in Gev is right by there. And that chapel has a mosaic within it, which represents the miracle. And one could theorize exactly because it's not intact, but some people believe that they even see a pig within that, a swine within that. And so from this chapel of the exorcism on the top, you get an overview of the area. Then if you go down to the shore, you get another sense. Then if you get a boat and come in from the water, you get a final sense. And by then pinpointing the harbor with text in hand, sitting in the harbor, then you can bring it all together and understand where this miracle took place.
Tell us a little more, Scott, about the Byzantines and their remarkable accuracy at times with where they put these churches and monasteries. Maybe comment on that a little bit, just to give our audience a little more flavor of that.
Well, I think they were struggling with where did this miracle take place, and they perhaps had access to Origen's writings, because Origen did a deep dive into this to say, why do we have conflicting traditions? What would the explanation be? And he literally went to the site and arrived at the same conclusion. So maybe following Origen, they build the chapel there, and people have always wanted to go to places to connect. The idea of why do you stand up a stone of a maseva? Well, it's because God did something on this site. It's a remembrance. And so when we go back to those sites and build a chapel, if you will, the point is that God did something here. It's not that I'm intrinsically going to draw something from this site, but it's a reminder to me that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He did something here. He can also do things in my life and in my times.
Yeah, the God of not only of the spiritual realm, but of the temporal realm of space, time, and history. And I think that's what's expressed in these Byzantine locations. Okay, so now let's talk, Scott, a little bit let's talk theology. Because that's a fun way to make a connection to all this archaeology. Let's talk about what this man did after he was delivered. You alluded to it before, but let's exposit that a wee bit.
Well, the first thing he did was he asked if he could come along with Jesus, and that's a pretty reasonable thing. Hey, this is a miracle. I've been set free. Can I come with you? And Jesus doesn't let him. He said, maybe there's no more room in the boat. I don't know. But he says, no, you go back to your hometown and you tell them what great things the Lord has done for you. And the man doesn't. So he goes back, and he's very well known in the region, by the way, because people are shocked when they see him in his right mind. And so when he goes back, probably to Hippos in this area, and there's a necropolis at Hippos that I visited recently, and there's a bunch of tombs there as well. And so who knows, it could have been maybe the man moved from tomb to tomb. It doesn't mean he was always staying in the same tomb. But if he was in Hippos, you can visit that today and just picture him coming in. He doesn't know Christian theology. He probably doesn't even know Jewish theology, because I think he's a pagan. But what he does know is he has met Jesus. He met someone who delivered him from demons, which is something none of them could do. And so it's the power of his testimony that I think garners many, many converts. The people come to Jesus and they beg him to leave their region. They don't want any more economic distress. A year later, when Jesus comes back to that region, there's a multitude who come out to meet him. So something has happened in the interim, and I would suggest that this man, the power of his testimony is what made the difference.
Yeah, amen to that. And his obedience, doing what Jesus told him to do, even though it was counterintuitive to what he wanted in the moment. He wanted to be with Jesus, which is understandable, you know? I mean, he just delivered him from the most terrible oppression. Well, Scott, this has been a fun journey to go on with you, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for doing it, and thanks for all you do to serve God's kingdom and to partner together. I love it. Grateful for you, brother.
Thanks so much, Henry. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you. Well, friends, thank you for watching Digging for Truth. We hope you've enjoyed this adventure about this particular event in the Gospels. But most of all, we want to encourage you to trust in Jesus to be delivered from the oppression of sin and death. Run to Him for deliverance, and He will answer if you do it in all sincerity. Thank you for watching Digging for Truth.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.